How's it going, everyone? It's Harvey from Weather 1000, and in this video we're going to take a look at 4 tropical disturbances that have the possibility of developing into a tropical storm in the very near future, including this one, which could develop into a hurricane in the very near future. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content. So let's begin. I'll take a look at the 5-day graphical tropical weather outlook, and of course we do see that this tropical disturbance right here has a high possibility of developing within the next 5 days, a medium 50% chance within the next 48 hours, but an 80% chance over the next 5 days, as not only could this develop into a tropical storm, but there's a possibility this could develop into a hurricane as it heads further and further northwestward, where we could see the conditions become a little bit more favorable for this to gradually intensify, potentially up to hurricane status. But there's still a high amount of uncertainty regarding the long-term future of this, so we're going to need to pay close attention to several different factors. And of course, we have 3 other disturbances which currently have a low chance of developing, but certainly there is possibility, including this one, which does, I'd say, have a higher chance of developing than the other 2 at this point, as there's a possibility that if this were to move westward, the conditions will become more favorable, as we do see that the chance does gradually increase for the between the 5-day time frame. So this is something we're going to need to watch as well, especially since it will move westward, potentially closer to the Caribbean, while the other 2 don't really have much of a potential of having of becoming any sort of major threat to land. So it won't be much to worry about with these 2 disturbances. Now, taking a look at Invest 91L at this point, which is a disturbance that currently has the highest possibility of developing, and we do see that there's a high amount of convection surround pretty much over a broad area. However, we aren't really seeing a close center circulation associated with this invest, which is the reason why this hasn't been considered a tropical depression just yet, as the thunderstorm activity, as you see, is very elongated. So as a result, there isn't a very small close center circulation that's necessary for this to be considered a tropical depression or tropical storm, and we aren't seeing that wind speed as equivalent to tropical depression or tropical storm status as a result of how broad the wind field is. We're going to need to see a little bit more of a close center circulation, which will likely develop in embedded in one of these thunder showers developing in this area. So we're going to need to pay close attention over the next several hours to see if it will develop a close center circulation for this to become a tropical depression and likely tropical storm Danielle in the more long-term future between the next 5 days. And in terms of the amount of humidity, we do see that it's in an area where the relative humidity is pretty high at this point, and we do see a small area where it is a little bit darker, which represents a little bit more dry air. But it is expected that this should deal with the dry air enough that it should at least develop into a tropical storm. The question is, how much dry air will there exactly be, because that will determine if it'll make that that next step from being a tropical storm to a hurricane in the more long-term future. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. And in terms of the upper level winds over this storm, we do see that the clouds are drifting a little bit to the north, as you can see right here, as there's a little bit of an upper level low just to the north of this invest, and it should deal with a decent amount of wind shear as it heads further northwestward, but it should be in a small area where this an upper level high will be over, which will not only decrease the upper level winds in the aloft for this invest, but it should allow for a higher amount of divergence to occur aloft, which would allow a little bit more convergence to occur and convection, which would allow this storm to gradually intensify as it heads further northwestward. Taking a look at the wind shear map, and as you can see, here is a strong amount of upper level winds we're seeing, equivalent to 30 to 40 knots as this continues to head further westward. But you see that this invest is right under an upper level high, which has been at least maintaining its organization since the wind shear is just slight enough under this upper level high, and this upper level high is expected to hover over it for quite some time, which should allow this invest to have an open area where the wind shear will be just light enough for this to organize and likely develop into Tropical Storm Danielle. Now let's take a look at what the computer models are stating at this time. So here's a look at the 12Z run of the GFS model, and if I were to continue to move forward, we do see that the GFS model is very persistent on developing this into a hurricane despite the dry air surrounding it, as it expects this invest to be just enough in a moisture bubble to where it's able to fend off a lot of this dry air. So as a result, this is strengthening quite a bit, but it's a stark contrast when we take a look at the European model, where the European model expects a lot more dry air, a lot less moist air, and as a result, this barely remains a tropical depression or tropical storm as it heads for northwestward. So this is primarily a very weak storm, but you're probably more concerned about the exact track of this because, of course, when we see a tropical cyclone move northwest like this, almost towards the direction of the United States, it's always something you want to be concerned about. However, the good news as of right now is that both of the main computer models are expecting this to eventually take that northeast turn away from the coast, which should prevent the United States from having any direct impacts. However, if this were to strengthen as fast and as strong as what the GFS model is suggesting, then you still need to pay very close attention along the East Coast when it comes to the surf, because we could see high surf as a result of potential Hurricane Danielle if it were to strengthen to that point. So you definitely want to avoid going in the water if we were to see this storm become that strong and come that close to the United States, which I think is a little bit more likely. And you definitely need to avoid going in the water because unfortunately, one of the leading causes of weather-related deaths in the United States are caused by rip currents, and it's definitely a sad thing to say because avoiding rip currents, rip currents are one of the most avoidable weather-related deaths you could imagine, as you just don't go in the water at all when there's a high rip current risk. So just make sure to stay off the water at all costs throughout the United States if we were to see a hurricane come this close to the United States, especially at this magnitude, where at this point the GFS model is leaning towards bringing a Category 3 type hurricane just off the East Coast. So that's something to keep in mind. But it seems like we're going to see just enough of a weakness in ridging to where this will turn northeastward. The Bermuda might need to be concerned for direct impacts associated with this, but we're going to need to pay close attention because there's still a lot of time to really iron out the forecast and iron out the track forecast. But as of right now, it seems like there's going to be just enough of weakness in ridging to where this will likely avoid the United States, but we can't maybe rule out completely that maybe there's a little bit more ridging to where this could move a little bit further westward. But at this point, the most likely scenario is that this will move out to sea, which is certainly good news. But you still need to pay close attention to rip current risk along the United States for this upcoming week, and this is expected to strengthen the tropical storm to hurricane status. So make sure to keep that in mind as well. So we're gonna need to pay close attention to this over the next several days. Now, taking a look at the model intensity guidance, and we do see quite a few ensemble members want to strengthen this to hurricane status, with a lot of them leaning towards bringing this as high as a Category 2 within the next 6 to 7 days. However, we still do see a decent amount of ensemble members that are maintaining the fact that this will primarily remain as a weak tropical storm, but there's still just as many, if not more, computer models, ensemble members wanting to take this to hurricane status. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, taking a look at the ensemble members spaghetti model track forecast, and we do see that a lot of them, the good news is that they want to take it just north of the Caribbean, which is certainly good news. That means Caribbean islands will avoid any direct impacts. You might need to still pay attention to rough surf along the coast, but other than that, this should primarily avoid you guys when it comes to direct impacts. And we do see that it's expecting to eventually take that north turn and then eventually east northeast. So that should definitely be good news that it should avoid the United States if this forecast maintains. But we're gonna need to wait and see if the computer models maintain this forecast over the next several days. Now, taking a look at what the other disturbances we're paying close attention to. So we are paying close attention to this disturbance right here, as we do see a large area of thunder shower activity associated with this broad low pressure system. And of course, as of right now, it's the area of thunderstorm activity is a little bit too broad to really enhance the possibility of this developing a closed center circulation, at least within the near future. However, we're expecting a little bit more moisture to move further northward, and this surface low to come off the Saharan desert coast and eventually move just north of the Cape Verde Islands, where it'll have its best chance of developing into a tropical storm, especially in the more long-term future. And we do see a decent amount of dry air just to the north of it that could be another inhibiting factor. But as of right now, it seems pretty disorganized, and a tropical storm is pretty much unlikely in the very near future, but it's definitely something to keep in mind beyond the 7-day mark. And if we were to take a look in the middle of the Atlantic, we do have an area where we could see the possibility of a tropical storm, very small, where we're pretty much seeing a dry center circulation, pretty much an upper level low that really has a wind speed and a close center circulation to be considered a tropical depression. However, the only thing that's really inhibiting it from developing into tropical storm is a lack of convection surrounding it. We're going to need to see a little bit more convection to consider this area a tropical storm, and that seems unlikely at this point, but there's still a 10% chance, so we're going to need to pay close attention to that. And then we're taking a look at this at these thunder showers, I should say, throughout northern South America and just south of Jamaica at this point, where we could see an influx of moisture move into the Caribbean and have the possibility of developing into a tropical storm. Now, the chance has definitely lowered, I'd say, since now the GFS model is leaning towards not really developing much of anything, and a lot of the thunderstorm activity should transfer over to the Eastern Pacific and not really develop in the Caribbean as initially expected from the GFS model. But it's still something to keep in mind, and I'll keep you guys posted if there's any updates regarding that forecast. And we do see that if I were to continue to move forward, we're going to need to pay close attention mostly to this tropical disturbance right here, which does have the best possibility out besides Invest 91L to develop. So we're going to need to pay close attention to that. But we do see that the GFS model eventually does fizzle it out as a result of the amount of dry air. And also, it's moving a little bit further northward to where it'll encounter a little bit of the cooler waters of the Atlantic, more so closer to the low 70s rather than the over the 80-degree threshold. So that should inhibit its convection by a little bit. So at this point, the chance that this will develop is low, but it's at least something to keep in mind since it's on the upper end of low when it comes to its probability of developing. So it's definitely something to keep the most aware of in the main developed region going into this week. Now, here's the sea surface temperatures, and you see that just north of the Cape Verde Islands, the sea surface temperatures dropped to 26 to 25 degrees Celsius, which is below 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So as a result, that this tropical wave should struggle in the midst of the cooler sea surface temperatures. So, which is part of the reason why the chance is so low at this time. And here are what the ensemble members are stating. We do see quite a few of them want to pretty much fizzle this out, but we do see it sort of rebirth in the middle of the Atlantic. But at that point, this low pressure system should become extra tropical, so it isn't really considered a tropical storm, and it should be well out to sea to really impact any sort of land. So it won't be much of a worry in the future as of right now. So taking a look at my total forecast, my general forecast for these next few tropical storms, we're going to need to pay close attention to these four. But at this point, it seems like tropical storm Danielle could develop into a hurricane, so we're going to need to pay close attention to that. And as for other these disturbances, the chance is low that they'll develop, but it's still something to be aware of. And while currently Tropical Storm Danielle seems like it might go out to sea, we're just going to need to wait and see if that forecast stays, because there maybe could be that potential that this could move westward if we do see a little bit more ridging just to the north of it. But as of right now, the most likely scenario is that this will move out to sea, which is certainly good news, but Bermuda needs to pay close attention. But anyways, guys, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content, and I hope you guys have a great day.